everybody, and welcome back to the WhiteFlag Warriors Podcast. I'm your host today, Dave Frank, and I'm joined with two guests today. Our Marketing Director, Kyleigh Leist, and her cat Bing, here to talk about her mental health journey, as well as whatever Bing decides he wants to say along the way.
Always the star
Kyleigh,
of the show.
it's good to see you this morning. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to hear this story that you're going to share with us. And I know a lot of people are too, because it involves not just a story, talking about, being a survivor of a suicide attempt, but twice. And a lot of people assume that most stories have this like one singular moment and then things happen and things get better. But for a lot of people, there's not a one singular turn of event moment. A lot of people have multiple struggles, the same struggle multiple times. And that's what I'm excited to hear. So please, from wherever you think is best to start, I would love to hear how you got from point A to point now B.
Oh gosh, I don't even know where to begin. That's a journey in itself. Well, we can talk about should we talk about my journey with WhiteFlag to start? How I got here?
Yeah, wherever you think is most appropriate.
Well, the cool thing about my story with WhiteFlag is I started right at the beginning because through my mental health journey, which I know we'll dive into that eventually, but I used writing blogs as kind of like a therapeutic coping strategy for myself. So I was writing about my personal journey and struggles with mental health, and Johnny, our CEO and founder, somehow found me by the grace of, I don't even know, and reached out to me and thought I would be a great asset to WhiteFlag. So just through my writing and sharing my experience with my mental illnesses, it got me here, and I couldn't be more grateful and more proud to be a part of WhiteFlag and also be a part of the WhiteFlag community using the app and all of that great stuff too. So yeah, I'm grateful to be here. There were multiple times, as you've mentioned before, that I didn't think I would make it, but we're here and we're taking it day by day.
What did you, so we both kind of had a similar start with WhiteFlag where we were doing our own thing in our own mental health space and then got approached. What were what were your thoughts initially? Was like, oh my gosh, this is such a match made in heaven? Or was it kind of like, all right, well, we'll see if this little dingy startup can carry me along too?
Well, my first reaction when Johnny was telling me about what WhiteFlag is and the core of it, I was like, wow, I wish I had this 10 years ago. This would have, potentially saved my life and saved me from my first suicide attempt back in 2011. So as soon as he told me about it, I was very thankful and on board right away. And anything I could do to help, spread awareness about this app, because I know what this app can do and what it would have done for me, I was all for it.
Right. So I know you, your blog was post attempt and pre WhiteFlag. Why a blog of all things? Have you always had like an inclination for writing or?
Yeah, I always liked writing, and I just felt it was easier for me to execute my words better on paper or through keyboard than it was for me to, vocalize it. I felt like I was talking to someone who was going to read it that potentially, was in my shoes or felt how I have felt, as opposed to talking to my mom or my close friends that, didn't really get it. So it was my kind of outlet to, just discuss everything unfiltered and raw and dark and optimistic and all of those emotions all in one blog post.
How many people did you have listening or reading, rather? Any idea?
Oh my God. It was really cool. At the beginning, I had someone from like London or something, I want to say, reach out to me and say somehow they found it. And like, I never did any advertising, just, through my like Facebook at the time. I, said I was posting this and this is what I was doing. So I have no idea how people were finding me, but at one point, there were thousands that have subscribed. So it was very, very cool to see that people, resonated with the story and my situation.
that first real one always hits the hardest too. It's like no training wheels. This wasn't my mom. This wasn't like my high school buddy. This was a real person that didn't know me, that thought it was worth reading, that is sticking around. So
Exactly.
that's
It was
really
very
cool.
cool. Yeah.
Yep. I love these little chains of events that lead us to where we are. So the fact that you're with WhiteFlag is because of the blog, and the blog is because of all the things that had kind of transpired in your life prior. Tell me some of that. What led up until the point of the blog where you started trying to sort through some of that stuff, with help and on your own.
Yeah, so I think I started to realize that I was struggling probably early high school. I kept having like these depressive thoughts and feelings and things like that back when I was probably like a freshman, maybe even eighth grade. And I didn't know how to navigate it at all. I didn't know what those thoughts kind of meant. I thought those were just like the norm, and it was something that everyone was kind of going through. So I didn't really talk about it at all until I was 16 was when I started to like really realize I was struggling. It was weird though, because I was considered like the popular girl in high school. I was like homecoming queen, captain of my basketball team. So I was like thriving. I had a really good relationship back then. And yeah, I just felt like something was off, and I never really like fit in with, who I was surrounding myself with. And I always kind of felt like an outsider, and just I knew something was up when I started, contemplating self-harm, and that was when I was 16. And it just kind of got worse from graduating high school and kind of navigating like the collegiate side of things. And my relationship ended, my parents were separating and getting a divorce, so everything was kind of crumbling all at once, and that kind of started the downfall, and kind of where I ended in 2011 when I thought I was gonna, end my life. And yeah, it was just it was a hard thing to kind of talk about and realize that I needed help after my parents were separating. I started to go to therapy, and I got diagnosed with major depressive disorder, OCD, generalized anxiety, all of those things, and started taking medication, and just trying to figure out what was working was one of the hardest parts for me.
I'm curious because, now, 2024, we know that mental health doesn't, discriminate, mental illness doesn't discriminate. But when we were in high school, because we're about the same age, that was just how it was. You didn't associate jocks with, self-harm. You didn't associate prom queens with suicide. So I guess my question is, this is almost an aside, do you feel like your social status in school and the things that you did, obviously you liked basketball because you like basketball, but just the life that you had in high school, which many would assume is like top 10 status in the school, was that something that just, like, aside from the mental illness issues, is that something that just kind of came naturally to you? Or do you feel like it was like something you had to work at to be what other people wanted to see?
No, I never felt like I had to put on a facade, because I, was friends with every type of group. You have the athletes, the nerds, the, kind of outcasts. And I was friends with all of them because I felt like in a weird way I fit in with every single type of group. So I had like my athletes that I always hung out with. I had the other popular girls, but then I like just thrived with any friend group. So I think it came easy to me, which is kind of weird to say because I was struggling at the same time. But my high school experience wasn't bad. It was just I was internally struggling and didn't know how to navigate it at all.
Right. Yeah, I was very similar. I was probably wasn't as popular as you, but I did fit in with a lot of other people, a lot of other groups, and I was just curious how that, how those two things correlated, because those are the stereotypes that we grew up with, is what kind of things people are allowed to struggle with based on who they are, which obviously we know now doesn't have too much merit. So how old were you during your first attempt?
I was 19. It was right before my 20th birthday. And I remember I was in therapy at the time, and I think one of my toxic traits, you'll say, is I'm very good at hiding my emotions and hiding, how I'm feeling. I'm sure you can attest to this as one of my coworkers until I, have my depressive episode and breakdown. I function very well with my depression and mental illnesses. But I remember calling my grandma right before. So I attempted on September 26th, 2011, and my birthday is September 30th. So I remember calling her a couple days prior and just saying, I don't want to make it to 20 years old. And it wasn't like I was crying out for help right then, but it was like the first time I actually said it out loud that, like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And God bless my grandma, rest in peace. But she was just like, of course you will. Like, this is going to be your best year. Like, you're almost 21. You're thriving in school and college. Like, you'll do great. Like,
saying all the grandma things.
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah. And I was just like, after I got off the phone, I remember sitting there. I'm like, I really don't know if I'm going to make it. A couple days later was my attempt.
We've talked about this a little bit before, but for those that hadn't heard, I mean, somebody was in the same building as you, or in the same home as you on your second attempt, and someone had just been in the same home as you, and had just left at your first attempt. So, we hear a lot of, proximity is important. Be around people that are close to you. You've got your phone available. Contact these people if you need. But for a lot of people, there's not a correlation between closeness to other people and the likelihood that you might try to do something like that. I guess with that in mind, how long had you considered that? Like, what's the path of consideration to ideation to an actual attempt?
No, that's a great question. Both of my attempts, and we can dive into both of them separately because they are very different. The first one, when I was 19, was very calculated, and I wrote a note and I sent out text messages to my mom, my dad, my brother, and my cousin Lindsay. And that was like my goodbye text. And I still have their responses saved and stuff like that. And I knew I was going to do it, but the way it happened on the 26th of September, it just happened so perfectly. My roommate left to go to the grocery store. She asked me if I wanted to go, and I said no. And then I just kind of, started my path to ending my life. And the one relatively recently, when I was 31. Happened very manically and not calculated and executed. Had no plan. So they're pretty different. But yeah, like you mentioned, I lived with two of my best friends. One of my roommates in 2011, and then my other roommate, back in 2023. So yeah, I mean, it's hard when you have a mental illness, when you're surrounded by all of the people that you love so much, but you feel most alone. And that's kind of what my depression makes me feel like all the time, is I can be surrounded by 100 of my favorite people and my loved ones that I know care about me and stuff, but I feel more alone when I'm with people, if that makes sense.
Speaking of people, that you love, how impactful was family during all this time, during growing up, when you started to have to explore these feelings and thought patterns, what was their role in all this, and how much of a hindrance or of a help, was it?
The family question, we love these ones. I had a great childhood. My parents were together until I was 19. Love my brother. He's my best friend today. We struggled a little bit because we were in high school together, and his friends used to joke with him about me, and he would get all pissed off and things like that. So we had our little separation for a little bit, but my mom has been my best friend since day one. She's someone I talk to all day, every day. My favorite person in the world. And then my dad, now our relationship is hindered for sure. We have some issues. He has some demons he needs to take care of for himself, and I had to set boundaries for myself in order to heal. But growing up, I was a daddy's girl through and through, and my parents did a good job of also masking their emotions, and that's probably where I got it, honestly. I never knew that they were struggling in their relationship, but I also, looking back, I never saw love. I don't think I never saw them go on dates or be like cute on the couch, or laugh together and do fun things. It was always about my brother and I for them. I never missed a basketball game or a track meet, nothing like that. So they were always around, and they were great. But it wasn't until they separated that it was like a huge shock to the family. And back then, I don't really think divorce was like normal. Nowadays, it's like 1 in 2, families end up in divorce. So I was one of the first out of my friends that had divorced parents. So that was another hard thing to navigate back then too.
Was that something that you kind of picked up on early enough on your own? Because you'd said that you had noticed signs, or I guess lack of signs of, a marriage doing well. Some houses you walk into and things aren't going well. And then other times it's something you notice when you visit enough. But
no, that wasn't mine at all. It truly was a shock. But now that I got older and kind of can see through the lenses more, it makes sense. There were things that I missed, or things that I think my mom had to deal with more so than she let on. She hid it very well from us kids, and we never saw fights. We never saw the yelling or throwing things. If they did a great job of hiding that from Corey and I.
So so the role of mental health in the household, obviously, even if things were good, maybe it wasn't like a huge priority to be open and discuss those kind of things, in the childhood. But like through your role with WhiteFlag and with your blog and your, both of your attempts, do you feel like that's changed a lot and the whole family is a little bit more open to discussing those kinds of things? And is that because of you, if that's the case?
That's a really good question. And I, kind of want to ask my mom that. I know through my attempts, it's very hard for her to talk about. It's something that I think she has blocked out in her mind. And, there's a couple times where we have talked about it, or I've been, vocalizing it. But yeah, I mean, my family is complex, and I know they'll be listening to this, so I apologize airing out our dirty laundry a little bit. But my family has dealt with substance abuse, addiction, things of that nature. So that hasn't really been discussed either. Corey and I never really talked about my parents' divorce and that effect on either one of us. We're more of kind of just brush it on the rug, and if we want to talk about it, we'll talk about it. But my brother has expressed how proud he is that I have been sharing my journey, and it's kind of inspired him to, discuss his with whoever his outlets are, if he has them. But
it usually does.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, that's a great question. I think it's cool with WhiteFlag now that my mom, she'll wear a WhiteFlag shirt or the WhiteFlag hat to work, and people will ask her questions about it, and she's very proud to tell people what I do, and she's my biggest supporter, and she'll always share my blogs or anything that we have going on with WhiteFlag. So I think now she's more willing to open up about her anxiety or her struggles with grief of my grandma passing, and things of that nature. So I think it's helping a little bit, and I think that the more you talk about it, the more it becomes less stigmatized and taboo, and things like that. So yeah, it's been a journey discussing mental health in the family.
Yeah, it's almost like a compulsion, I've noticed, because like the minute that I had sobriety, if it was ever mentioned or brought up that I don't drink alcohol anymore, there's this compulsion for people to be like, I don't drink much either. Or what's that
Mm-hmm.
like? Or, I don't like to drink actually. People want to, once they know that that layer of vulnerability is, kind of torn down, it just takes one. And then everyone's like,
Yeah.
well, I have thoughts on this too. And I have feelings about this too that I would like to share if we're going to talk about this. When you had the blog running, I'm curious if across channels it's similar in other mediums. Did you get a lot of people that reached out to you and just kind of dumped on you with their thoughts and feelings? And because it's what I notice when you bring mental health into a conversation, into a scope, people just instinctively feel the need to blurt out things to the person that they're listening or reading or watching or what have you, because a lot of people don't have that resource or those tools very often. So is that something you noticed?
Yeah, and I think, as you know, as someone who has been a content creator, not that I'm a content creator by any means, but yeah, there was a lot of people that would reach out, and that was the thing I struggled with the most, honestly. Obviously, I was super honored that people were even reading it to begin with, because it was just kind of, hand fingers to keyboard and just going with it, not even thinking of, anyone reading it. It was just my outlet. And I've realized that now that I've kind of come forward and started talking about, my suicide attempts and my depression and things, people kind of vent to me, but it's very rare that someone will reach out on behalf of like checking in, like, how are you? It's more of people just like dumping their load and their trauma and their, which I love, because I love, being able to share my experience and what has helped me, or, let them know that they're not alone. But it's also very hard when I'm in a depressive state, when someone's, reaching out for advice or they're struggling. I'm like, yeah, I am too. And I don't know how to, express it, because I always felt like I needed to put on a kind of like a front that, yeah, I've been through these things and I'm okay, but like I'm really not. I'm still fighting every single day to, be here. So it's difficult, but it's also something I'm very honored that someone even feels comfortable, sharing their experience, because I know how hard it is to be vulnerable and how it's not easy for a lot of people. It's not easy for me either. So very honored, but at the same time, it's difficult, because sometimes I just want to be checked in on too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why WhiteFlag exists, right? Because
Exactly.
the open for business sign is not always turned on.
Yeah.
And we don't have an easy way to, to relay that information to people. So I'm sure you're the same way, but I'm to the point where I don't even mind hearing what they have to say. I just know that there's this obligation to say something back. And it's not always it's not even just I don't want to. I'm not the person you want to talk to right now, because
Right.
my
Yeah.
advice may seem a lot more depressing than what you were hoping for.
Yeah.
For how I feel today.
Yeah. I have this
So
one friend, sorry to interrupt you, but I have
yeah,
this one friend that our stories are relatively similar. She hasn't had any suicide attempts, but she deals with depression just like I do on a daily basis. And we'll check in, or, want to vent to one another. And the way we kind of send the text is, are you in a good headspace? And if she says yes, then I
mm,
say, can I, unload on you right now? Or if she says no, I'm not, I'm like, okay, me either. I'm here for you, love you. Like, we'll talk in a couple of days. So I always have that one person that I can just be like, can I unleash on you? Can I unload? Like, are you okay enough for me to do this? So it's always nice to have that one person.
and that'll get more normal. It'll
Yeah.
take some time, but we ask people if they have the day free if we're going to ask them to help us
Mm-hmm.
move. You
Exactly.
know,
Exactly.
so you should always ask what kind of resources that person has available first. So I read several of your blogs. I made sure to bookend, and I read the very first one, and I read the very last one, and I read a couple in between, just to get a feel for kind of the progression. Um, and one thing that I saw in the very first one was you had mentioned how you'd been with depression for so long that you kind of just accepted that it was there, which is good, but also that you couldn't live without it.
Yeah.
That even if you could make it go away, you don't even know if you'd want to or what that world would look like, because it had become kind of like this unwanted friend, you know? So I'm curious now, do you still feel that way now?
Yeah, honestly, I've been with it at least half of my life. It's the most consistent and stable relationship I've ever been in, because it's always been here, you know? So I almost feel like I wouldn't be me without it, which is very weird to say because I don't wish this on anyone. It's something that, you know, takes over my life daily, if not, you know, hourly. So I still feel that way. I almost feel like it's kind of like my crutch that I hold on to, because it's something that I know that it's there, and it feels like it's always going to be there. And, you know, it is like mental illness doesn't just go away with like you know, a light switch as much as we want it to. There's medications and stuff that you can do, and peer support and therapy and, you know, all of these things. But it's the most consistent thing in my life, which is, you know, weird to say.
It is weird to say, but it's good to know, because there's a lot of people out there that don't have depression, or maybe they do, that would say, I can't believe she would say that she would just want to keep it around. But the fact is, I'm sure you're not the only one that feels that way either. So it leads me to another question. There is a lot about depression that people don't understand. And that's not to say that the information isn't known. People just don't know it. They haven't learned it. So from all that you've experienced, whether it was just through your journey with depression, or, you know, through both of your attempts, what are a couple things even about depression that aren't common knowledge, even if it's just related to your own personal experience? Everybody knows that depression is a mental illness that isn't just being sad. We all know the same basic 5 facts about depression, but there's a lot of nitty gritty that comes from actually having it. And like you said, kind of learning about it, like this intimate partner that's been with you for so long. You know more about depression than a lot of other people do. What are a couple things that you can share about, you know, that experience that they need to know to better understand it for others they know?
Yeah, you hit the nail first and foremost. When you think of depression, you always think it's someone sad. And I don't consider myself a sad person. I don't consider myself a stressed person, or, you know, someone that's crying all the time. I'm very high functioning in my depression. And it comes in waves for me. I'll have a great day where, you know, my consistent relationship's not there, and the next day it's overwhelming and engulfing me, and it makes it very difficult for me to even want to get out of bed. Or I'll wake up and I'm pissed that I, you know, woke up. It gets so bad that it's exhausting to even, you know, brush my teeth and like drink a glass of water. It's different every day, and I think people don't realize that it can come in waves, and it can come just randomly and just, you know, take you out for the count. And my depression usually comes with a depressive episode of some sort. So that could be, you know, a couple days, or one that lasted like half of a year for me, that I just couldn't, you know, stay afloat, and I was just drowning every day, and just really struggling. So depression is very weird, and it's very dark, and it's scary at some points. And it's very easy for people to say, oh my God, I'm so depressed today, or go for a walk and you'll feel better. That's my favorite thing, is when people say, you know, get outside or feel the sun on you. And I'm like, I can't even, you know, move without, you know, wanting to crumble. So it's different every day, and I don't think people realize that. I think people just always think of someone just sitting and crying and, not really having an explanation for it. And yeah,
Well, let me ask you another question based on what you just said, because
yeah.
I know several people with anxiety, and based on what they've told me and what I could easily tell on my own, whether it's anxiety or if it's ADHD or people that have struggles with their autism, whatever it is, most mental illnesses or psychological conditions come with this very large sets of cause and effect, where I know if these environmental things are happening, or if I act like this, or if I eat this, or if I do this, this is the result that will come from that, and how I think and how I feel. Depression seems to be one of the few that has less sets of cause and effect. There are some, that are obvious, like vitamin D deficiencies and stuff, but even just in your day-to-day life, in one of your blog posts, you had wrote about how, Monday is an 8 out of 10, Tuesday is a 1, Thursday is a 5, Friday is a 10. And your own lived experience, because I know you don't want to hear go for a walk. I know you don't want to hear meditate or stand in sunshine. But for you, is there anything about the life that you live that does have some semblance of cause and effect, where if you have these things happening, environmental or actions or otherwise, it's going to be a good day or it's going to be a bad day because of that?
It's hard in my depression to realize that I have purpose. So sometimes when our work week is super busy and we're super productive and we have a lot of exciting things going on, or things to look ahead to, whether it's hanging out with my friends or having plans for the weekend, that helps. But it also sometimes my depression strips me of that joy of it's hard for me to accept that there's purpose sometimes, and I am here for a reason, and I am loved and cared about and valued and appreciated, and all of those things. So yeah, I mean, it's like a catch-22. Sometimes it, is your biggest cheerleader, and then it's also your biggest demise. And being productive definitely helps, and getting out as much as you don't want to, and it pisses you off to hear, just get out of the house, just go and do this. There's little things that you can do each day to give you that sense of purpose, at least for me. I put makeup on today. That's one step. As you see me looking rough 99% of the time. And sometimes when I do that one small thing, or I walk to the mailbox and do certain things like that, it gives me just a sense of purpose and a sense of hope, as little as they are. And I'm sure people listening to this that don't suffer with depression like I do is are you kidding? You walk to the mailbox and that gives you purpose. But yeah, it gives me a sense of, value in my life that day. And it makes me realize that I am here, and, we're going to continue to fight. As silly as it and minuscule as it might be to someone, it's huge for people struggling even to get out of bed.
Yep. And it's, well, you say people that don't have depression may not understand it, but people that do have depression, or people that have depressive episodes, or even people that struggle with, negative thoughts and motivation in general, might appreciate hearing that anyway. Motivation, having ADHD and depressive episodes, motivation's a big problem for me. And so little things are important, and little things don't even have to be logical. Walking to the mailbox it's a lot different than putting on your makeup. Putting on makeup has this sense of look at me, I'm better than I was. But walking to the mailbox is so insignificant. But if that's what works, that's what works. For me, it's wiping down even the smallest counter space with cleaner.
Yeah.
Even if it's the size of my palm, it's this part is clean now. And it gives some sense of justification that what I'm doing today is good. And that's important, because you have to have something to build on. Nobody expects you to to come blazing out of the gates. So to have some sort of, foundation is important. I have a question about, so I'm sure there's a lot.
Blogs? Are you looking at my blogs right now?
I'm not. I already read your blog, and I had several questions about it.
I'm sure.
I'm sure this is an expansive answer, but your first blog post was 4 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah, your first blog post was 4 years ago, 2020. Your last one was 2022, 2023, about halfway to where we are today. So the girl that posted her first thing 4 years ago to what woman in both. So the woman that posted 4 years ago to the woman that is in this podcast today, what does the one today say to the one from 4 years ago that she needs to know?
It's something that I have to tell myself on a daily basis now, because it, like I mentioned, it's hard for, feeling that sense of purpose. So something that I remind myself daily is you deserve to be here, and you're worth more than, what you're giving yourself or what you're accepting for yourself. So that's something, I have a nice little sticky note here on my desk that says you're worth more. And then I have a couple little notes in my bathroom that say you deserve to be here. And then a couple other little motivational things that I look at every day. But yeah, I wish I could talk to the 2011 Kyleigh, more so than, the 2 years ago or the 4 years ago me, because that version of myself was very lost and confused and trying to navigate in what the hell this mental illness was. So now that I have a better grasp on it, because it has been so consistent, I wish I could kind of tell her that, these thoughts are normal, and, you're not the only one feeling this way.
This is, this might be a hard question, but I'm curious. So you have all the knowledge about how your brain functions and what made you have the attempts that you had, and how you felt before, during, and after. What you just told me, if you had said that to you prior to either attempt, if that's what you had heard, would that have stopped you from doing that?
I'm not sure. Like I mentioned, my 2 attempts were completely different in different ways, but it would have been nice to know back in 2011 that, your thoughts and feelings are valid, and you don't have to be a burden to anyone, and you're allowed to talk about these, and there are people that understand. So yeah, to that aspect, absolutely. I wish I could have told myself that back then. And the one that happened last year, a year and a half ago now, that version of me also needs to know that my depression doesn't define me, and that version is still me to this day. I'm still, don't get me wrong, I struggle every single day, fighting to, stay alive and, navigate the depressive thoughts and things like that. But that version and this version of me needs to know that I'm here for a reason, and I'm supposed to be here. And, what that looks like is, I guess, here talking on the podcast and sharing my story with someone that might be struggling as well, trying to, fight every day. So yeah, those versions of me definitely needed to hear something like that, I would think.
I appreciate that, because it's, for a lot of us that have not been in that situation, suicide can feel very binary.
Yeah.
They attempted or they didn't attempt it. It happened or it didn't happen. They're still here or they're not here anymore. They're depressed or they're not depressed. But regardless of if it would have still happened or not, or if it would have made any difference, it doesn't change the fact that you still needed to hear it, that you still deserved to hear it.
Yeah.
Which is important. I have a lot of hypothetical questions,
Okay.
but it's more just because, again, this is like you said, this, depression doesn't always make sense. It
No.
doesn't follow a line of logic a lot of the times. So I wouldn't expect any binary or straight answers on this topic either. I'm going to relate this to getting sick, like throwing up, which sounds weird, but it's the best analogy I have. So if I start to feel a little queasy and then I am like in a hot room and that makes it worse, and then I, think about how I'm going to end up getting sick and that makes it worse. There is a certain point where maybe I can mitigate some of those things that bring me back down and cause me not to get sick, right? But there's a point where you can no longer do that. I'm past the point of no return. No amount of cold compresses or back rubs or anything is going to keep me from throwing up at this point, right? Do you feel like, from what you had experienced in either of your attempts, that there was kind of a lead up point where something could have been different that had maybe changed the outcome, and then there was a point where it was gonna happen regardless of what anyone did? Or are you just not even sure?
Yeah, I wish I knew that answer. I've gotten that question a few times of, what led up to it. Or I think that's another kind of misconception is people always think like some specific event had to have happened in order for someone to take their life. And that might be true for, certain situations, but sometimes it's just like a slow burning flame that just kind of takes over and it hits you and you didn't even know it was happening. It was just kind of there, and it took longer than one situation. And I think another question is I another thing, I guess, I always try to think about what led up to it. Or for instance, my most recent one is what happened that day and why did I do it so kind of manically. And I didn't think about it. It just kind of happened that day. So I look back on that one more so because that one didn't make sense to me. And I'm sure it was a shock to a lot of people. And that one to me is almost harder because I try to think back in 2011, like, yeah, there were situations that happened in my life back then, my, losing my relationship of 6 years and my parents divorcing. And yeah, all of that kind of makes sense for someone fresh in college and, navigating that stuff. So that one feels like it could be justified more, but I think it was unfortunately going to happen regardless. And I didn't think the one last year would ever happen. So it's hard for me to pinpoint a situation or a event that happened to make me want to take my life in either one. But if I had to kind of justify it, I think my first one is more justifiable than my last one.
I know after your second attempt, you had been admitted. What was that experience like? I generally know, but for those who don't, what was that experience like? And having been through it, what could have been different to have it be better?
Oh gosh. Well, for the record, after my first attempt, I was not admitted to inpatient treatment. My brother and my dad came and picked me up from college, and no one knew I attempted. My ex-boyfriend kind of
For
just had
you.
a gut. Yeah, he had a gut feeling something was up, and called my brother, I think, and contacted my roommate. And I hid it very well, so no one knew. I lived like 45 minutes away in East Lansing, Michigan from where I grew up. So I remember my brother and my dad getting there, and my brother and I going to the gas station, and the effects of the attempt started to happen. And I remember going into the bathroom and throwing up, and there were like ironically like police right outside like grabbing a cup of coffee and things like that. Yeah, and then I remember puking the entire way home, puking all over my brother's side of his car, and I got home and had some side effects, but no one knew I attempted that day.
What did they think happened?
I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know if they thought I was like drunk and, just in a depressive state and needed my family. And I called my therapist. Somehow I, survived the night after, having the effects of the attempt and laying on the bathroom floor and all of that. I called my therapist and I said I needed an emergency kind of session. And I went in there so calmly and just said I attempted, and by law she has to do something about it. So I was admitted to the hospital, but it was just like the ER, and they let me go. Someone asked me a couple questions and I was out of there and went right back to school and tried to navigate the whole thing. So but to answer your question, the second one was very traumatic for me. I attempted, and I walked out of the bathroom, and I told my roommate, and she immediately took me to the hospital.
What compelled you to do that? Before we go further, I have to know. So you made an attempt,
Mm-hmm.
and then immediately went and told your roommate directly
Mm-hmm.
after. Was that like a kind of like shaking back to reality situation, or regret, or just felt like it's not going to matter either way, so I might as well tell her? Like what compelled you to tell her directly after doing that?
I think it was a like, what the hell did I just do moment, and it was like immediate regret. And I knew that based on what I did, that there was like no possible way I was going to survive this. And after I did it, I immediately knew that I still wanted to be here. So yeah, it was one of those immediate things that I was just like, what what did we just do? We worked so hard to get to this point, and why? So yeah, I was in the ER. They had to pump my stomach and do all of those things and monitor me for 24 hours. And then I was admitted to the inpatient facility for a week, which in itself was very isolating and very, I just felt like another patient as opposed to like a human being that just attempted to take their life. It just felt like I was just kind of there to fill a bed at that point, and just not getting, I don't know, I literally just felt like another number. Like they didn't know my name. They kept calling me Kyleigh, which everyone does, but for how many times I had to remind them, like, my name's Kyleigh. They thought I was diagnosed with something that I wasn't, and I was on different medications. So it like made me feel like I was losing my mind, that what I knew about myself and my mental illness like wasn't being reiterated to me. It was like something completely different. So I was like, am I losing my mind? Is something like, am I in a psychotic episode? Am I
something else entirely? Yeah.
Right. Like, where am I? And yeah, the inpatient facility has still affected me to this day, certain triggers and different things like that. So it was very rough to be in an inpatient facility. I wish it was a better experience, but it was not.
I find that very interesting, that especially for your second attempt, where you described it as just kind of like a snap decision that just kind of happened without a whole lot of prompt, had just as an abrupt of a ending and an out of that kind of state of mind as it did going into it. Again, where you would normally find logic there, maybe none.
Yeah.
To anyone that is listening to this, that's listening to you, I know that for a lot of people, ideation and kind of a ramp up to what ultimately becomes an attempt is a real thing. To anyone that's maybe in that in between, anything you want to say to them, and even more so, things that you would recommend to, again, just steer in a different direction as best as possible. We can't guarantee things will or won't happen. We can't guarantee inevitability or lack of it. But like you said, just doing small things for yourself, trying to go in a direction you want to go towards. What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, I still fight with the suicidal ideation on a daily basis. There's, moments of each day that I have, my mind telling me that it would be better if I wasn't here. So something that I have, like I mentioned, I have to remind myself is I do deserve to be here, and I'm here for a reason. And someone that might be, hearing those things as well, as you just have to keep reminding yourself that you're better here than you wouldn't be. And people always think that suicide is a very selfish thing, and sometimes that can be misconstrued in the whole thing. But it's hard for someone in that state of mind to see a way out and see the light at the end of the tunnel, and things like that. So I also think it's important to feel those thoughts and feelings as dark as they are. Masking them and putting a band-aid on it and forgetting about it isn't going to help you or your journey and your mental illness or mental health struggles. It's something that you need to feel, and you need to be able to talk about, whether it's to someone in your corner that relates to it, or someone that you confide in, or just to yourself. Sometimes like me, my blogs and stuff weren't for anyone else to read. It was just me kind of talking to myself, and thank God people found it. But I think you have to sit in those thoughts, and you have to feel those feelings in order to continue to grow and move forward. And if you don't, it kind of just blows up in your face. And that's what happened to me. I think both times is I was masking a lot, and I didn't talk about it. I actually, before we did this, I went on my Instagram and I was looking at like my social media posts prior to my last attempt. And I wrote one in January. So I attempted in February. I made a post in January, and it was an old picture of me. It was from like 6 months prior. And I said, I missed this person. And I think that was like my way of knowing something was happening. But I made that post and I didn't talk about it after that. I didn't talk to you or my best friends or my partner. I didn't talk to anyone about it. And I think if I would have, it wouldn't have gotten to where it did in February. So I just encourage you to, as hard as it is to, acknowledge the feelings and accept the feelings that you're feeling. You just have to. It's easier said than done, I know, but to be able to feel the feelings and thought, and really think about the thoughts that you're having, could save your life.
You had mentioned the difficulty of finding the light at the end of the tunnel, and I noticed it a lot, like in your story in the very early years that you were telling me about, is kind of this like longing to get to the good part, the good place. And all the conversations that you've had and all the points that you've made after all that was just having light in your tunnel.
Yeah.
Where it's a very sad and lonely road to try and just focus on some better version of something, an indiscriminate amount of distance away. You don't get very far doing that, but putting light in your own tunnel and finding ways to to make whatever journey you're on the best that it can be, which you've shown time and time again, with WhiteFlag and with your own story and with your blog and with the conversations that you've had with people, and I'm sure with the conversations with people you've had on WhiteFlag. That is a small thing you can do. Mm-hmm. That's a small thing that you can work on and focus on. And it was so cool, again, from the chronological story you told and the blogs that you wrote and the person I've come to know, to see your progress through all that and your mentality shift and how you focus on things become so different has been really cool to see. So I not only appreciate that you get to do that, but that we get to experience it with you, because we're learning things with you along the way.
Yeah.
Kyleigh, is there anything that you would like to close out with? Anything you'd like to tell folks? Are you still doing the blog?
I had a kind of epiphany that I didn't like the name of the blog that I had. It gets better. And I feel like that's such a cliche thing to say to someone who's struggling, kind of like go outside or go work out. I feel like it's kind of, they go hand in hand, and like it does get better. But I decided to change the name of my blog to Made for More. And I have to remind myself of that every day too, that I'm made for something bigger than, what my depression tells me I am. So I changed the blog name and I kind of revamped it a little bit. And I'm just ready to start my first blog post. It's been, as you said, I can't believe it's been 2 years since I've made a post. I've obviously written for WhiteFlag and shared my journey on our blog, but I need to get back to mine for sure. And I actually had someone reach out to me. I think it was a couple of months ago, maybe more recent than that. But someone said, "Hey, where's your blog at? I need a blog post." And I was like, "I know. Sometimes it's just hard for me." I told myself when I first started writing it that I was going to write once a week, and I was like, that's just not manageable, because sometimes it's repetitive. So yeah.
Well, the listeners are putting pressure on you now. You've got homework now. So if they did want to find the blog Made for More, where are they going to find it?
Yeah, it's madeformore.info, and don't go look at it yet. I promise by the end of September, we will have a new blog post that you can take a look at. But it's there and ready to tell my story again and share with others. And one thing I would want to tell someone that may be struggling right now or, going through it. This month is usually really hard for me too. It opens a lot of doors and floodgates with it being Suicide Prevention Month and the kind of anniversary of my first attempt. I can't believe it's almost been 13 years. But what I would want to tell people is you are made for more, and you do deserve to be here. And don't let your mental illness kind of tell you otherwise, because, you're here for a reason, and what that looks like, you might not know right now, but I promise we'll figure it out, because I'm still trying to figure it out myself too. But just remind yourself that you do deserve to be here.
Fantastic. Beautifully said. Kyleigh Leist, author of her upcoming revamped blog, Made for More, madeformore.info. Marketing Director for WhiteFlag app, doing fantastic work with us here at WhiteFlag, giving people free anonymous peer-to-peer support. Kyleigh, I really appreciate you being on here, sharing your story. I know it's going to be a big impact for those that get to hear it, and they can go and share some of what they've learned with other people on WhiteFlag as well. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for, asking the hard questions that I'm sure some of these people needed to hear and wanted to ask. So I appreciate you and giving me a safe space to tell my story.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.